From 0 to 25, you have the face your parents gave you. From 25 to 50, you have the face you gave yourself. If you're not careful after the age of 50, you'll end up with the face you deserve.
Phenomenous. Colding.
Welcome back to Life's Deceit with your girl, me, Jen Simpson. How are you doing? Welcome back. Thank you for joining me, my new subscribers. Please, before you leave, don't forget to hit the like, comment, and the subscribe button. I got some juicy things for you. Matter of fact, I got some juicy things to drop before 2025 hits. So welcome back. I hope you guys are having an amazing week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever time zone you are in, I hope you're having a beautiful morning, afternoon, or night. It might be nap time. Listen to my sweet melody, the voice flowing through your ear, my voice echoing through your body. I'm crazy, I know. Welcome back, guys. Thank you for joining me. I love you guys. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all the love that you guys give me. And we're about to build a real community. Because, I'm still learning this whole podcasting and all the stuff that I need to do. But so far, I think I've been doing pretty good. And today we have our second male guest. I am so excited to introduce him to you guys. I am ecstatic about this guest because he's teaching me something that I try to do on my own. I didn't go to school for it, but I have this intuition where I can do it. Alan Stevens. He is a profiling and communication specialist, guys, teaching human behavior, raising and teaching children. He gives advice on nonverbal communication, building communities, relationships, building, profiling, and reading people. I said that right, reading people. Who watches SVU, Special Victims Unit, Criminal Minds? Who watches it? You ever notice that when they're looking for their perpetrators, they're always calling in a profiling specialist? They need somebody to help them profile. What does this person look like? What do they like to eat? What do they do for fun? What type of career field would they be in? What's their mindset? Based on how they committed the crime, whether it be, them, somebody, what type of stab wounds, gunshot wounds, how did they do it? Was it with aggression or love? And then they start profiling and figuring out who this person is, what they look like, where they could work, in a bank, in a call center, a lawyer, a doctor. So we have Alan Stevens, and he's about to teach us how to profile. Even think about it, HR. Has HR ever called you into their office and, they got their poker face on? They were trained to have these poker faces on. So you can't figure out their real or true intentions or what they're about to do. They can call you into the office and say, hey, how you doing? How was your day? We are so happy for having you a part of the company. Thank you for your services over 20 years. And you wouldn't even realize that that was your last day because they're about to fire you. They're about to dismiss you. So Alan is here to teach us how to profile and analyze people and communicate with nonverbal people. So without further ado, let's welcome Alan Stevens, my second male guest. My second male guest. My second male guest. Hello. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. I was absolutely excited when I heard about you
Thank you.
because, I seen that you are a profiling and communication specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And I have never come across somebody so intriguing. I was just saying to myself, I watch Criminal Minds, Special Victims Unit, and every time, they're trying to analyze a perpetrator, why they did something, they need a profiler. That's going to tell them what does this person do? What do they eat? What type of career would they be in? Based on maybe the stab wounds, gunshot wounds, the crime they committed, was it aggressive? Was it, some type of... I was just excited. So I'm glad that you reached out, and I'm glad that we're finally here now doing this.
Excellent.
So how are you doing? How's your day?
Not bad. It's getting on towards 2:30 at the moment in the afternoon on Thursday. So it's your Wednesday there, I believe.
Yes, Wednesday night.
So welcome to the future. It's Thursday here.
And how's the weather over there right now?
It was pouring down rain last night. I went to go out to a meeting out in the bush, and it was hailing when I was going out the door. So I just did a U-turn and went back home again.
Oh, wow.
The hailstones were pretty heavy, but it's a little bit overcast out there, but it's starting to warm up finally.
That's good, because it's cold over here in Canada.
Yeah, well, we've just come out of our winter. We're in the spring, etc. But October is usually 24 degrees Celsius on average, and we came nowhere near that.
Really?
It was well under. Yeah, we had 13 and 15 degree days.
I am dying to go to England. I'm like, somebody, please invite me to England for something. And my coworker is actually getting married next year, August, in England. So it looks like I'm about to come over there.
Excellent.
Alan, before I got on here, I was in the bathroom and I'm like, my second male guest. I'm so excited because, you just touched something that's so deep. Campfire. And I know I saw that in your bio, but I wanted you to explain to people what it was, because males usually don't have a safe space.
That's it.
And there's never, I was watching a YouTube video today where somebody said men aren't supposed to cry. And I read the comment where somebody said, where did you guys get this from, that men aren't supposed to cry? It is perfectly okay for a man.
We all learned that very well from especially baby boomers. That was drummed into us at school.
Yeah, but for some reason, somebody had came in and reversed that. Society has tried to reverse that and cancel that. Men are supposed to be hard and tough and just take things on the back and keep it moving. So we talk about that campfire and no bias and racism is not allowed. It's not tolerated. It's beautiful because, you get to hear other people's experiences based off their race, their culture, their background. And it's so important and needed because you get to learn so much more about people and where their mindset comes from.
Exactly. The Campfire Project came about from going out bush with an Aboriginal group. And when we were sitting around the campfire, the conversations that we had were always respectful, no matter what the subject was. People the men could open up and talk about the pain they've been going through. If they've had tears or anything else going on, they were able to share that and treat it with total respect. And that's why I thought, well, we need more of that, because one of the biggest problems we have today is that boys don't have a rite of passage.
Yes.
And in a lot of cases, 50% of them are coming from broken marriages. So they don't even know their fathers. So they've had no male role models around them. And that's one of the reasons for creating the Campfire Project. I'm also a director on one of the Montessori primary schools. I'm a director on a charity.
I've seen that.
Yeah, so I'm a director on a charity that came out of the Campfire Project called the Business of Smiles. And the Business of Smiles, we go out, we're working a lot with men, but we go out into the public as well. Like last couple of years ago when we had floods in Lismore, we handed out 2,500 pairs of socks, and the socks have a story with them. The yellow socks with little black dots all over them.
Yeah.
The black dots represent your tough days. You're not going to get out and they're going to come. They're going to happen regardless. But the yellow reminds us of the warmth of the winter sun on our back, the warmth of having the support from others and the support that we give them. And we've got enough of that, our dark days never join up. So like the black dots, they're kept separate from each other. And so it doesn't turn into a bleak life. And we handed out 2,500 pairs in Melbourne that Christmas, and just before that, 2,000 pairs after the floods up in Lismore, and we started as many conversations around mental health. So people would just break down and just tell us their life stories once we went through that explanation and gifted them a pair of socks.
That is beautiful.
Mm.
You know, a lot of times we judge people based on how they look. And we don't even take the time to say, you know what? Let me talk to this person and see who they really are and what they're going through. And talking to you right now is giving me butterflies. Just to
Well,
see
it
the
doesn't
work that
matter
you're
what
doing.
their background. I've spoken to, as I said, all different genders and everything else we've had in the group. I've spoken to males who are transitioned to females, females transitioned to males, all different walks of life. The youngest person to actually be involved in an interview was 9 years old. The oldest person was 99. His name was Ted Hughes, so I advertised I was doing a TED talk. And had a bit of fun with that. But everybody wants to feel they belong. They want to feel they contribute. They want to feel that they're valued. Doesn't matter who they are. So if you can talk to somebody and get that connection, then when you talk about the things where there's differences, you can do it without being judgmental.
That's right.
And you can be there supportive. And that's what the Campfire Project has proven it could do. That, well, nobody other group worldwide has achieved as much as we've achieved in the 6 years.
And for people who want to join it, how do they do that?
Well, I've got a link that I'll give you as well for your listeners later on that goes straight to a website. On the website, there's a Facebook logo. You click on the little F, the blue F, and that will take you to the Campfire Project Facebook group page. You just enter, select to join there. There's 2 questions, which are pretty much the same question, and that is asking if you'll respect everybody. You answer those 2 questions, then you'll get let in. People said to me, why did you ask the same question twice? Simply, there's your 2 chances. You don't get a third. So everybody knew zero tolerance to any abuse or disrespect. And because of that, everybody realized that by answering that question, they were protecting themselves as much as everybody else.
Right. And on the third time, you're booted out.
That's it. So I won't argue with anybody in the campfire. If anybody does, then I'll take them out of the Campfire Project, talk to them out there, and if they can then prove to me that they're going to do the right thing, they can come back in. But they'll know that if they were disrespectful to anybody from that point on, they would never get back in again.
Okay.
Because we're adults. You got 2 chances and then you get a third one. You can't do it all in those 3 chances. You're looking for a 4th chance. That means you've got no intention of changing.
Right. And how can I get a pair of those socks?
Well, we've got a website where you can purchase them off. We're just sorting that out at the moment. We're getting a new website being created, but that will become available shortly.
And you are a profiling and communication specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Where did your journey to that begin? How did you start out your career? When did you decide that you wanted to be a profiler?
That was after my 2nd divorce. I've been married and divorced twice. My first wife left, first of all, my journey started when I was 23. I'd finished my training in Sydney with our national telephone carrier. I was working in the computer area, and I got promoted to a job in Newcastle where all of my staff were older than me. So I had to learn how to read body language to start with, because that was the only thing we really knew about in the 1975. Mm-hmm. And so I worked with that, got all those staff on side. And in fact, one of the guys who is still a good friend of mine today, in fact, I was having coffee with him yesterday morning. He was one of my senior officers in Sydney. And then when I came to Newcastle, he was on my staff. So you can imagine getting everybody there on side. In the 80s, I wanted to be able to read people more. And I got involved in psychometric profiling like Myers-Briggs and DISC. We were doing those as workshops in our national telephone carrier, Telecom. And I got involved in that. In the 90s, I started with NLP, finally did my master's in neuro-linguistic programming, so the language we use to steer the conversations. And then in the early 2000s, I was working with a company. They brought me into, they were currency traders, and they were teaching people how to trade currency, the Forex exchange, but most of their people weren't making money, so they brought me in. We used Myers-Briggs and DISC profiling to try and work out their personality, so we knew how to teach them. But when they went live, they were still losing money. And then we watched and realized their behaviors were completely different to what their profile was saying they should be. Then I realized that when you ask people questions, they try and second guess it. They will try and figure out what you're asking, or they'll try and, because everyone wants to look good in themselves. They want other people to value them in a good light, or see them in a good light. So they would try and second guess. But when they went live with their trading, no matter what practice you put in, your personality is always going to come out. And so I needed a better way of reading them. And somebody said to me, "You ever looked at reading faces?" And that was shortly after my second divorce. And I thought, this is interesting. So I think, the most important thing you'll ever learn is the next thing you learn after you think you know everything. And that's been my philosophy all the way through. So I started looking around. I found a gentleman by the name of Paul Ekman, a psychologist in America, who did all the original research on the micro expressions, little twitches on the face that give away the emotions and what's really going on, whether the person's telling the truth or not. And a lady who taught how to read the facial features to work out someone's personality. So that way I would never need to ask another question again in getting someone's personality. In fact, if I've got your photograph, I've got your personality long before I even meet you in real life. And then I know how to change the way I like to be spoken to match the way that you want and need to be spoken to. Then while I'm talking to you, I've now got the language right. That's where the language then comes in. But now I've got the feedback from your body language and the little expressions, the micro expressions that tell me, did I read you right? Is there something emotionally going on? And are you telling the truth? And so that brought 4 different modalities together, 4 sciences that then created rapid trait profiling, which is now unique worldwide. And it's proven itself to be the most accurate and fastest way to read people. I've got a gentleman in Perth. He's a business coach. He sent me 5 photographs originally. I sent him back a 45-minute audio of what I could see in these facial features, and talked about how his buttons would get pushed and how people would see him and how he could use that to his benefit. And that's when he told me he used to be an undercover narcotics agent. And in that role for 2 decades, as he said, he had to learn how to survive in that. So he used skills that he believed were 85 to 95% accurate. As he said, if they hadn't been, he wouldn't be alive today. But the fact that I could take and put from his 5 photographs, put as much as I did in the audio tape that not only matched, but nuanced everything he learned about himself in those 2 decades. And so that was just from his photographs. So, of course, as soon as he did that, he then wanted to do my master course. And as far as how long has this lasted, I've got clients who are still doing testimonial videos for me over a decade later. I've got one mother who's the last one she did about 6 months ago was 13 years after I profiled her son when he was 6 years old. And she just wanted to talk about the changes and what he's doing today. Of course, the school teachers and the psychologists that he had at the time said he would need a carer for the rest of his life. He'd never amount to anything. He's now 19 years old, going on 20. He's living on his own. He's got his own place. He's got a girlfriend. He's got a car. He runs, pays all his own expenses. And this is a guy that they said would need a carer for the rest of his life. He's now an assistant manager in a nightclub and loving it.
Wow.
We taught everybody around him how to speak to him in the way he needed to be spoken to.
Yeah.
Therefore, he didn't get triggered as much. They were able to reduce the medication. In fact, with the doctor's approval, they removed his medication completely, which therefore meant that he was then more aware of everything around him, and therefore he was able to grow faster and into a young man, which he wouldn't have been able to do if he'd been on that medication. See, we only medicate kids to fit them into the system, and we're over-diagnosing them because our school teachers and everybody else don't know how to handle the kids anymore. They're not being taught that.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons why my focus is to get my stuff into the hands of every school teacher on the planet.
I didn't know what to expect when we were going to, have this chat. But you answered like 6 questions I already had all in one. And profile me. Here I am, profile me.
Well, I know number one that stands out really obviously is that you're adventurous. You like to try new things, but that would also include travel. So loving to travel and things like that. And yes, overseas travel, not just traveling in the local neighborhood. So when you get a holiday, you really want to go for it. And I can also see that you're self-reliant. You're happy to work and do things on your own. There's a nose for news there. So you know a little bit about everything that's going on around you. The only thing you got to be careful there is that just to make sure you get the full story before you tell other people about it. But I can see that you're also quick to give to people your time, your energy, and sometimes you just give away far too much of yourself because everybody else wants it. So you keep giving and not realizing you've left nothing for yourself or somebody who's close to you who needs some support at the time. So I always say to you're quick to give to people, but ask yourself how you can teach them how to fish, not just give them the fish. So help them by guiding them so they can learn from it and they don't need to come back and ask you again. And do it in a way in which they can then go out and help other people. I know that I can see that you're fairly fussy about things as well. They've got to be exactly right. So pride in the way you dress and everything else, pride in your home, all of that will be there. A little bit of dramatic appreciation, so putting the flair into the things you're doing, but not excessive amount. So somebody who's got a lot of dramatic, because every trait has an upside and every trait has a downside. If you've got someone who's really got a strong level of dramatic appreciation, they're fantastic on stage. They like to express themselves outwardly. But when they do stress, they can come across as a drama queen. And to the rest of us who are more ascetic, it's about how things feel inside. So if you've got a partner, they've got the opposite trait, there'll be the opposite side of the trait that was attracted you in the first place. But as you get used to the upside of their trait, then you start noticing the downside. And we often think that other person has changed, but they haven't. Our perception of them or understanding of them has changed and nothing else. So if we know how to talk to their trait, we can bring all that excitement back into the relationship. And it can be done on the spot.
You're for real.
And
that was for the guests because, people hear that and they're like, that person can't profile me. But I will tell you, you profiled me to the T.
Thank you.
It almost brought tears to my eyes. I won't even kid you.
And as you can see on the screen, I've got a 22-inch monitor and your face is around about 20 mils in height. And I'm able to see that from a very small photograph. Like if you're on Zoom and you've got 42 people on the screen at once, I can profile them.
Wow. You are the real deal. I used to be like, for myself, I can read people. Their spirits, their body language. Everybody's eyes tells a story. I like to say that because if somebody could be moving their mouth, but if you're actually paying attention to their eyes and the movement of their body, you'll get the whole truth.
That's it. See, they say that your eyes are the windows to the soul, but your facial features are the windows to your mind, how you like to think and process. And one of the reasons, they always told us that when we were talking to people, look at the person in the face.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
Well, here's another reason for doing it, because you can see all those expressions. You can see all the features. Now, if I can see your features, well, the biggest issue that we have with a lot of profiling, or when we look at somebody, we think we've read them. Now, it could be that we've read them very well. We've picked up the non-verbals, the things that we're not hearing, but what we're seeing, but unconsciously pick it up. Or they could remind us of somebody who's done the wrong thing by us in the past. Now, if that's the case, then we're making a judgmental call on them. We're not making a proper judgment. Because if two people can look very similar, they will think the same way, they will process information the same way, but what they're processing can be completely different. One could be a saint, one could be a sinner. One's trying to figure out, how can I help the other people around me? And the other one's thinking of, well, how can I help myself do everything that they've got? How can I rip them off?
Yeah.
And so, and that, how many times have you heard somebody, you looked at them, you just didn't trust them. If you stop and you think about it, quite often that stems back to a past experience. Mm-hmm. But if they're speaking and everything sounds fine, but you get that gut feeling that something's not right, then the possibility is you picked up the nonverbals that have told you something's not matching. And when the nonverbals and the language, the verbals that don't match the words they're using, we always go with the nonverbals, and we don't trust what they say.
Right.
You know, for a lot of people, it takes a little while to learn this, mainly because at school we were always told by the school teachers, listen. So we focused on listening, and listening was only listening to the actual words themselves. And yes, we were picking up some of the tones of voice and things like that, but that's still only 45% of the communication. You know, the words are only worth 7%. The words, the tone of voice, the body language, they're all equally important, and you need all three to have a communication. But the information that they contain, there's 55% in the body language, there's 38% in the tone of voice and the other nonverbals, and the words themselves are only 7%. And so once you realize that, and you don't trust what they've actually said, there's something wrong with the way they've said it or the way they've been moving or whatever, their body language, we'll always go with where we think that they're not telling the truth.
Yes. And you talk about the mother that, recently did a review from, you profiled her son at a young age, and you wanted to integrate your teachings and your lessons within schools. I think it's a great idea, because there's a lot of times where teachers prejudge children based on what they say. A child could be crying and angry, but you're not reading them properly.
That's it. You don't know why, where it came from. It could be something at home. It could be something in the schoolyard. It could be bullying or whatever. And the only way you can get to that is to talk to that person in the way that they need to be spoken to. From what I can see, you're sort of midway between what I call analytical and big picture. Big picture is somebody who just wants the least amount of information. Just give me the overview and I'll make a decision on that. Analytical, they want to know the depth of everything. You start talking about something, they want to know every little bit of it, and they want to know the depth of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when those two people talk to each other, they're not going to connect. As the analytical person is speaking, they will try and give as much information as they need themselves to make a decision. So they'll inundate the other person, and the other person will switch off. If it's the other way around, the person who just wants the least amount of information, they'll just give an overview, and the analytical person will keep interrupting them and dragging them back, wanting more information about the last thing they spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes frustrating for both of them. But I'm analytical. If I'm talking to somebody who just wants the overview, I'll just say to them, look, there is a lot of information here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the overview, and then you ask the questions that you want to ask. And at that point, they go, oh, thank God, I'm not going to be spoken at. It's going to be a conversation. I'm going to be talking with this person. But I'll add on the end of it, look, if there's something there that you don't ask that I think you need to know, can I add that then? I give them the overview. I ask them what questions they've got. And if there is something there, like say, if I was a financial planner, for instance, and I had to cover certain material by law, then I would say to them, look, remember I said before there was some information if you didn't ask about that I thought you need to know, that boring stuff, we're there now. Is that all right? And I usually get a nod and I get a bit of a giggle from them, and I give them that extra information. So now we've taken as long as it needed to take. It took a lot less time than if somebody was giving me the information, what I would need, because I'm analytical, but I give it to them in their format. Now, if it's the other way around, that person would frame it similar way, but they'd say, look, there is a lot of information here, and that I'm going to give you the overview. The reason I'm going to give the overview is I want to make sure I don't forget anything, and I'm sure that's important to you. The other person will say yes and go, right now, I'm going to give you the overview, and I'll spend as much time as you want. You can ask every question you've got. And I know they're going to ask every question more than if I was a big picture person, they would ask more questions than I would even think of. So I'll let them ask their questions and I'll just answer their questions. Now that will take longer to get through to the sale, but I'm more likely to get through to it because I've been talking their language. I've given them the space for them to ask all the questions. Once they got all the questions answered, they're able to make their decision. And we're off and running.
Okay. And how do you profile and communicate with children, even so young? Like, communicating with kids can be challenging for some people, their attention span, and, they start fidgeting and they don't want to answer your questions, but how do you, because for you to be able to profile that young man and him be successful and be able to be off those medications, you profiled him right.
Your traits are made up of a combination of two. Traits that come through what we call nature, which were passed down from your parents. So there's already some foundation traits there at birth. Then as we grow up, we start to make decisions ourselves and everything else. We analyze things and we start to go into what we call our nurture traits, the traits that we develop in response to our environment. So as we're getting older and that, we start to develop more ridges and crevices on our face. Our face selects its final shape because when we're first born, we've got a tiny little head, and that's necessary for two reasons. But the sutures haven't sealed yet because the brain hasn't developed. As the brain develops, the skull then expands out with it. If it didn't, we'd end up with brain damage and a lot of headaches. And so the other reason is for the mother's convenience for birth. So we need a small face. So the head grows over time. So we're going to some of our nature traits will change, but the nurture traits really change because of the muscles we keep working when we're thinking in particular ways. Like somebody who's really focused on detail or wants things to be exactly right, they'll pull their face, they'll express, and they'll get these vertical lines here between the eyebrow or above the eyebrows. That will be what we call exacting lines. Things have got to be exactly right. So the more I work that muscle, the more I create the ridges or crevices. So our face changes over time. When I'm giving presentations, I often say to people, from 0 to 25, you have the face your parents gave you. From 25 to 50, you have the face you gave yourself. And depending on the audience and how cheeky I'm feeling, and I'll read them first to know who's going to get upset and who's not, I'll then say, if you're not careful after the age of 50, you'll end up with the face you deserve. So think about how you respond to things, because all of this in line with the Campfire Project, the Business of Smiles and everything else, it's getting people to connect with themselves, to see where their real strengths are and appreciate themselves in a way they've never been able to appreciate themselves before. See, everybody, when they find out what I'm doing, I'll get people sitting there and next thing you know, they've got a book in front of them, it'll be up in front of their face, hiding themselves. Well, usually at that point, I say, too bad, I've already got your personality. The moment I saw you, I had all that, so you can leave that up there if you like.
Yeah.
But I point out to people, I'm looking for where your strengths are. I'm looking for how you want to be spoken to. Because if I've got all that, then I know how to speak to you in the way that you need to be spoken to and want to be spoken to. So if I'm selling a product, for instance, you're more likely to listen to me and want to buy. And let's face it, this is brilliant when it comes to finding the right partner and keeping the right partner, because that's one of the biggest sales of your life, and that is convincing someone else to spend the rest of their life with you in a partnership. The other side is with children, getting them to eat their broccoli and their vegetables. There's a sale in itself as well.
Yeah.
So the more that you can read the other person and know how they need to be spoken to, you can speak to them in that way. But as far as it goes, I've profiled newborns. I remembered my youngest grandson when he was born. He's 10 years old now. It was 3 days after he was born. I saw him and I pointed out a couple of traits to his father. I was one in particular. I just looked at him and started laughing. His father said, "What's going on?" He said, "Look," I said, "he's going to get all the girls." I said, as he's growing up, you take him to the cafe. Waitresses and that'll be all over him. He's got all that. He's got that appearance. I said, but he's also got what I call critical perception. I've got it as well. It's great when it comes to looking at documents and things like that. Find errors really quickly. Pictures on the wall, anything that's out of kilter by a millimetre or so, I will pick it up. Mm-hmm. And I said, he's got the same trait. And I said, and the reason I'm laughing is that I raised my 3 sons on my own. They were 4, 11 and 12 when their mum left. And so I raised them on my own. And as I pointed out to him, it was payback for them, what they got up to when they put me through when they were growing up. But my grandson was going to be my ally to give that son of mine a hard time. So but from there, at one point I peeked out, I said, he's got a music trait. Well, very shortly after they got him home, and particular music, when they put it on, whatever he was doing, he would stop. If it was when he was a toddler and playing on the floor, a particular song or tune would come on the TV, He would stop what he was doing, turn around and just stare at the TV. And as soon as the song finished, he was off doing things. So knowing that, they know now what music to play to actually lift his emotions up or quieten him down when he needs to. When he's 10 years old now, if they need him to sit and study, for instance, especially when he gets into high school, put the right music on that will help him be able to concentrate more on his studies. And so you can use it all through there. In the case of a young child, though, it's not so much teaching them. It's a matter of teaching everybody else around them to know how to speak to them in the way that they need to be spoken to. And as soon as they understood that, like young Jack, 6 years old, he one of his problems he was having at school, like the after schools care and the school teachers didn't want him anymore because they wanted him more heavily medicated. And I gave information to his mother and then to the school teachers and the after schools care of how to talk to him in the way he needed to be spoken to. About a year later, they said he would never do presentations in front of the class. At the age of 7, he was up in front of the class doing presentations. It was the following year they let the psychologist go, and with the doctor's approval, took medication off the list, off the table altogether. And because of that, everybody knew how to talk to him. And, he's a kid that had to think in a certain style. He also had the traits that showed he couldn't sit still. Not just because he's a boy, but most boys, they shouldn't be sitting in a classroom. They should be out in the paddock. They should be taught outside.
Yeah.
But in his case, when he got a bit noisy, the teacher knew not to put him down the front, but put him over the side, where he could still turn around a little bit without causing an interruption, but see the things that were going on behind him. See what was going over the side and all the rest of it. If you've got a kid who's noisy, the teachers make this mistake of bringing him down the front, put him in the front of the room and say, you sit there, front and center, do not look around, listen to what I say. But the temptation of the noises and other things behind them causes them to turn around.
Right.
The teacher actually makes a rod for their own back. They make it more difficult for themselves by not understanding the child. The moment you know how to speak to that child, and the teacher in particular knew to, if he got a bit, because his traits were he couldn't sit still for a long time. It was physically uncomfortable. And if he then moved around, he would disrupt the rest of the class. So she gave him regular breaks, but also gave him chores to do. Like in one of the sessions, as I was talking, she stopped the class. She said, look, I've just remembered something that I needed an answer. I've got to get someone to go to the principal and get this answer. Who's the fastest runner in the room? All the kids put their hands up, but she picked young Jack. And she got an envelope, put a little note inside of it, closed it up and said, look, can you run this to the principal? Wait there, let him read it and then get his comment and bring it back. Well, all it said on the note was that Jack needed to run off some energy. Can you just put a little comment on the thing, reseal it and send it back with him? And all the principal wrote on it was, good one. Put it in the envelope and send it back with Jack. He came back in. She then lifted him up by saying, fantastic, you are the fastest runner. That she read the note and she said, oh, that's what I was waiting for. Now I can get back to the class. She built him up in a way, there was no way he was going to play up in the classroom because he'd now got that connection with her and she had the connection with him. So it's those sort of things. And at that point, some teachers will say, oh, that's a lot of work. Well, if you don't read the kid right and you're going to have that kid in your class for the rest of the year, you're going to have a year of misery.
Right.
What do you want to do? Do you want to get it right up front, spend a little bit of time up front and get it right, or have a disaster over until you do learn how to do it properly?
Profiling, communicating, rather than judgment.
That's it.
And
so I've got a lecturer over in Dublin. She's in a college over there where she usually had about 7 students per term. It's an exclusive college and people come from around the world. They're usually late teens into their early 30s. But most of them have different conditions, Asperger's, autism, dyslexia, and things like that. We did the master course, and as we were going through it, another college closed down. So she had a sudden influx from 7 students to 70.
Wow.
And so we went through, because one of the things by her doing my master course, as I wanted to create and train my competition, I'm now helping her to create a course that she can then use and teach the other college lecturers, because they all want to know what's going on. They've also got the same students in their classes, they're all struggling. She's got 70 students and they're working in pods together, which psychologists and others will tell you with the range of different conditions they've got, there's no way you can get them working together. But she has. That's why she's able to handle the 70 students. And so now I'm helping her build a course. So I want to get that into high schools and into primary schools, and also into early education, childcare centres and things like that as well.
That is needed like right now, because teachers don't want to do the work. They would rather just prejudge the child for the whole school year, punish them, than figure out ways to communicate and work with them. It's happening across all the school boards. Doesn't matter what country you're in, it's happening.
So, and you look at the teachers, I don't know a teacher yet who became a teacher for the long holidays and the high pay. Neither of those exist. If you look at their hourly rate when the kids are on holidays, they're still marking papers, setting a curriculum and other things. They work their tails off. They became a teacher because they wanted to help kids. But the education systems are what broken the teachers. You've got all these teachers who have got pressures on them to get the curriculum in place, get the performing in the schools, because schools are judged by their academic levels of their students. So they're all under pressure. Yeah. The parents want their kids to be learnt, so the principal's under pressure, the teachers are under pressure. They're just in survival mode. But if we can get together and we can say, hey, let's get beyond just survival mode, now let's get to the next level where you can have the respect of those kids. So originally, my youngest students was a 14-year-old boy and his mate who was a 15-year-old. They both worked in one of my other clients. She was the grandmother of the 15-year-old, and she ran a cafe, and they used to work in the cafe. And so I trained them as well. And when I asked them how they were using it, when I asked the 15-year-old, he said, oh, I'm profiling all the school kids. And I said, well, tell me about that. He said, I know now why they do the things they do. I know why they push my buttons. I know how to handle them. And I said, well, what's that giving you? He said, tolerance. That's when I realized we needed to get in the hands of the school kids. I couldn't use what the 14-year-old said at the time. His comment was that he was profiling the school teachers. And I said, well, how's that working for you? And with the cheekiest little evil little smile on his face, he said, I'm profiling the school teachers. I said, and how's that working for you? He said, he said, I know which ones to pick, which ones to leave alone. I'm stirring them more than I've ever stirred them before in my life and not getting into anywhere near as much trouble. He said, I'm having a ball. And I said, well, what about your academic levels? What's happening there? He said, forget about that. He said, I'm having too much fun stirring the teachers. So I know that if it gets into the hands of the kids, which I'm looking at doing through other avenues, then the teacher's going to have no control in the classroom unless they learn these skills. So if I have to do it that way, make their life harder before I can make it easier, that's what I'll do. Yeah. But my 11-year-old granddaughter then became my youngest student when she was 11. Her father's a federal policeman. I've worked with the federal police. I've worked with the tax office. I've worked with Disney Films, Gillette, business of all sizes, and parents and school teachers. So this works across all areas. But when I worked with the federal police, he had a manual. He left it on his table. He rang me one day and complained that the family couldn't sit and watch Netflix anymore, the movies. And I said, what, your internet finally crashed? Because they were in a country area. He said, no. He said, every time we sit down to watch a movie, Jess is profiling all the actors and she won't stop talking. And I said, well, how did that come about? She said, she found one of my manuals. She's been reading it. So I then asked her if she wanted to learn. So I sent her own copy of the master manual. And that arrived on the Thursday, and on the Friday, the following day, they were flying out for Helsinki. This is 2019 for Christmas to see her other grandparents because they live in Finland. And I thought, well, that's probably going to be the end of it. But then her father sent me a message when they got into Finland saying that she didn't watch any movies on the flight on the way over. All she did was read the book from cover to cover. And when she wasn't doing that, she was walking around the plane profiling the passengers. And so just call me Dr. Frankenstein. I created another monster. Yes.
You created another monster. Now your son can thank you for that.
And so now, well, the first thing she did, she was able to work out the bullies. So they no longer had an effect on her. And then she learned how to ask the school teachers questions in the way that they would answer it the way she needed to hear it. So she virtually taught her school teachers how to teach her.
Wow. I
And
need to
that's,
join your program.
well, that was doing my master program, yeah.
Yeah, I need to do your master program because I want to learn how to profile people too in a better way.
Because it's all, people will ask me, well, do we ever turn it off? And I go, part of it I'll turn off. If I'm at a party, for instance, I'm not going to turn off the facial features, because if I can read those, I know how that person likes to be treated and spoken to. I can have a better conversation with them. I can make their time more enjoyable and my time more enjoyable.
Right.
If I'm doing a sale, then the micro expressions, the body language are going to be turned on, so I can get a connection to see how well I'm connecting with them. But I can also pick up there's something emotionally going on. I'll stop the sale and I'll try and work with them, see if I can help them with whatever it is that's holding them back at the moment. If that means that we leave the sale and we go back to it another day, fine. But if I do that, the end result is they realize that I was focused on them. I'm interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more trust when we do get back to the sale. But then if it's an interrogation, then the micro expressions are really going to be switched on. Because in that situation, I want to find out whether that person, how evil are they? Who are they trying to use or abuse? And so it comes down to, I'm not using now the micro expression and body language as a lie detector. I'm using it as a truth seeker. Find out what the truth is and then decide whether that person is someone I'm going to support, or whether it's like somebody said to me, if you don't tell, if you don't tell people that you picked them up lying, I said, well, look, if somebody lies, it depends on the situation. When they said, well, what do you mean? I said, if it's parties and things like that, not going to worry about it. If it's around where the lies are affecting other people, again, I probably won't say anything. I'll just help them dig a hole they can't climb out of. Because if I turn around to everybody and say, hey, they're lying to you, I've then got to explain it. And there's a debate, because some people will like them regardless, because if they're a great con artist, they will have had those people in their pocket, so to speak. So it's a big job. But if I can orchestrate it so that all those people recognize that they are lying, then I don't have to just put myself in that position. So I'll then use it for that as a lie detector, but also then as an awareness raiser for everybody else in the group. So it's always done to look after the people who are doing the right thing. In the Campfire Project, it just made it easy for me to connect with people so they could then tell the stories. These are stories they've never told their family, their psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, friends, or anybody else.
Yeah.
And here they are opening up and talking to me for an hour, anything from 35 minutes to an hour about their past life and all the secrets that they've got that they haven't been able to share with anybody before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's always done to make connections.
Yeah, that's how you make the connections, right? And you talk about working with the police department. And, there's a lot of cases coming out right now. And there's a recent one with a popular YouTube family where the stepfather was arrested for molesting his stepdaughter. And, I watch YouTube channels and I'll stay up late and I'll try to find out more information. And you get to the comments and you see people saying, well, I could tell from his eyes, his face, the way that he moved towards the daughter, I could tell that he was a predator. They're analyzing things and now they're bringing it up, although you were following this person's channel for years. So have you ever found yourself in that situation where you had to profile a family like that, or a situation where a child was molested or, sexually abused, whatever
I was asked by the Department of Department of Neuroscience in Manchester University, and originally started out, I met this guy and we had a bit of a conversation. He got me to, I profiled him while we were on screen. Then he brought his son in and asked me to profile him. His son was adopted, so it wasn't that I could say, oh, he's got this trait from you, etc. But I could say he's got these traits. Went through that, and he went, that's pretty cool. He said, how would you be on looking at a video? I said, well, what have you got in mind? He said, well, I've got some small little segments that have been made into one larger video, about 3 minutes in length, of a bloke who was supposed to be, was accused of actually murdering his wife at Christmas time. But for 18 months, the police couldn't catch him. He He'd take the children over to his parents-in-law's place, leave the children with the parents. They'd take the kids to school. They'd bring them home from school. He'd come back in the afternoon, pick the kids up and take them home. And this was going on for 18 months. And the parents in their hearts knew that he had murdered their daughter, but couldn't do anything about it. So you can imagine the anguish they went through every time they saw him. And but still loving their grandkids. But in the video, the first 20 seconds, I went, something's going on here. Then I said, yes, he has. Well, it had been an old case that I'd never seen. This was long before I'd started profiling. And what had actually happened was, because I pointed out what I could see in the videos of what was out of place. And yes, he had murdered his wife. He had actually had his brother help him to dispose of a body, and it wasn't disposed in one location. There was 7, parts were left in different places around there was some left next to a showground and everything else. But all that was in the video. Now, for the people who you just mentioned a moment ago, everybody as a young child is a perfect profiler, except for a very, very small percentage who just can't remember facial features or facial expressions and things like that. But just about every child, that's how they survive. They need to be able to recognize who's mum, who's dad, who are the people around us that are safe to be around. At the same time, they have to be able to pick up their emotions as well. That might be dad, but if dad's angry, especially as we're growing up as toddlers, it might be, okay, when dad counts from 1 to 3, don't let him get to 3 because that's when we get smacked. So you've got to be aware of all that. But as we get older, it's like any muscle. If we don't work, it atrophies, because as we get older, our energies and interests go to whatever we're focused on. And that might be sports. It could be hobbies. It could be going to school and learning subjects. Later on, we're finding partners. All the activities we get involved with, we're not reading people because our focus is over here. We're not really focusing there. Our unconscious mind is still picking stuff up. That's one of the reasons why we will pick up stuff that doesn't match, but we can't figure out why. Yeah. Our unconscious mind knows, but our conscious mind hasn't got it yet. But so everybody's a great profile. But as we get older, that muscle just atrophies. What I say to people is, I'm not teaching them something they didn't know. I'm really just virtually nothing more than a personal trainer. Because if you were fit when you were younger, and then you get married, you have your kids, you're working, you're trying to survive and look after your family and everything else, we may not get to the gym. We get to that, the comments come out that everything was north has now gone south, because, men, as we get older, chest disappears and it ends up in our stomach. And so to get those muscles back, to get the, a bit of a fitness back into our abs, for instance, we have to go and exercise. Do you go and do it yourself, or do you get a personal trainer who can watch you and make sure you're doing it the right way so you can get there faster? Mm-hmm. That's me. I'm that personal trainer. So it's nothing magical. It's something that every child was doing when they were very young, but just something that we've all forgotten about. It's no longer on the, it's stored back in our brain, but it's not there present in our conscious thought. And all I do is help to make the unconscious conscious.
I have to laugh at that because you said it perfectly. We know the signs, we see them, but our unconscious mind wants to block it out. And you're the person that just shows us, like, this is the light. This is actually what it is. You noticed it. You were right, but you tried to block it out with everything else that's going on in your life. You got to get the kids to school. You got to cook dinner. You got to finish that work project. When you should have just took a minute to analyze what you saw.
Yeah, because what actually starts to happen as well is, because our neurology and physiology are linked, everything we feel inside we express outwardly. And because of that, that's why micro expressions and body language work, because whatever we're feeling inside, our body will give it away, etc. So that part's there. Any muscle we work over and over is going to change its shape. We're going to develop, if we did a bicep curl, we'd build our biceps. Our triceps won't grow if we're not working them. So, you put all that together. This is why the facial features work so powerfully. They give you that strong foundation of how that person does like to think and process. So now I know if that's the way they think and process, how do I now connect with them in the way that they need to be spoken to and get the results that I want to get from them, or want them to realize. So that's where the coaching and that comes into it. But everybody has got the skill, but because of everything else that's going on in our life, we just don't practice it.
Right. And what advice would you give to parents that, their subconscious mind is, what advice would you give to them to open your mind?
Well,
It's
one of the
okay
things,
to pay attention.
if they're looking at their children, for instance, number one, I'll always say that any of your listeners who are listening to that, who have got young children, how often do they push you to the edge but don't push you over the edge?
Mhm.
They have read you. They know how far to push you and everything else. If they know that throwing a tantrum gets the right response, they'll do that as well.
Mhm.
So the very first thing that parents need to do, whether they're together or separated, they need to get on the same page. They need to know how their child needs to be spoken to, and both of them, when they're talking to the child, talk to the child in the way the child needs to be spoken to. If they do that, then the child can't play one against the other. Because how many times do the kids run up to dad when they've been in trouble with mum, and vice versa? And they get the other partner to turn around and go, well, what did you yell at them for? And next thing you know, it gets the parents fighting and the kids are back in control again.
Yeah.
Now, children need to have boundaries. If they don't have boundaries, they get frustrated. And that's when they do all the silly things. And kids love boundaries. They don't like barriers, but they love boundaries because that guides them on what they can do. It makes their life simpler, makes their decisions easier as well. And so if both parents can talk to the child in the way the child needs to be spoken to, straight away, that's an improvement in the connection with the child. But in doing that, they usually find out about the differences between themselves. And now they learn how to talk to each other in a better way to get some of that relationship improved again. I've actually had people who, well, they were separated, but they've said, well, I'm not really interested in getting back together with my partner, but we really have a great relationship now. We're co-parenting the parents from our separate places. There's no arguments and all the rest of it between the parents. And the kids aren't playing the parents against each other anymore because they can't. The parents are on the same page.
Right.
And so this is what it's all about. It's all about the more we understand other people, the greater the connection we have with them, and the easier our life is in the process.
And you talked about when your wife left and you're raising the children on your own. A lot of people go through that. How were you able to navigate, effectively communicating with the kids and also profiling them? Because, mom leaving home is a big thing.
Well, see, most couples, when they separate, there's anger between them. And, there's feelings of loss. That life that we thought we had, it's gone. And so next thing, there's fighting. One of the things that I realized that, well, this was before I even learned how to profile, because it was after my second divorce that I learned to read faces. But before that, it was body language and the other things that I'd been doing. But I realized that if my sons didn't respect their mother, then they wouldn't respect women in their lives. And they'd end up with a lot of broken relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because over the years between the two wives, I had a lot of different lovers. After my second wife, I started to go down that pathway again. But with my first wife, I built a relationship with her so that, well, my oldest boy, when he was 18 years old, he was about to go out the door, go to school. He stopped in the doorway. He turned around. He looked at me and he said, I've just got to tell you. I said, what's that? He said, me and my brothers, because I've got three boys, he said, me and my brothers, we feel that we're really lucky to have you. I went, what? Where'd that come from? And we started talking about it. I said, well, yeah, your mother and I are separated. He said, yes, but we have two houses to go to and neither of you bag each other. You don't put each other down. So we feel comfortable in both houses. There's no stress. And I said, what about your mates? All their mothers and fathers are together. They said, yes, but they're always fighting. And don't you notice every time we come home from school, there's 15 other kids with us? They prefer to be here than at home.
Yeah.
And because I was working from home, so they were stuck with me when they got home. And so I realized at that point that the impact that they had on the boys. So then after my second marriage, and it was only a short couple of years, my first wife came to me one day. By this stage, that same son is now 18 years older again. He's 36 at that point. He's now in his 40s. And she came to me and she said, look, she said, I need somewhere to stay for 3 months. I know you've got a spare room. You live on your own. Can I be a lodger? Pay my own way. I'll stay out of your way because I know you work from home. I said, as long as you do that, And it's for 3 months. She said, yeah. Well, she moved out 3.5 years later.
Oh.
And people said, why could I do that? Did we have a relationship? Only as, cohabitating the same house. She paid her way. She stayed out of my way. We occasionally had a meal together. If I was cooking a roast dinner or something like that, a big roast dinner and just one person to eat it, well, that's a little bit on the, selfish side. So I'd invite her to join me on that. She cooked a couple of meals here and there, but most of our time we ran our own separate lives. And people said, why could you do it? I said, simple. I realized a long time ago, what we put in ourselves and the way we run our lives has the effect on us. Now, I could hate her for having told me I wasn't good enough to be a husband. Or I could love her for the fact that she gave me 3 sons that I love and respect, and I wouldn't have had them without her. If I'd had them with...
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
The second wife, for instance, it wouldn't have been the same kids. But I love and respect my 3 sons. And so with that, I'm very thankful to her for that. So I could love her for that without needing to be in love with her. So we could cohabitate in the same house without any problems. And that had a massive impact on my sons. They're all married. They've all got 2 kids each. So I've got 6 grandkids. At the same time, all their mates were watching what was going on. What was happening in our house was a natural amusement to all the other kids going, this can't happen. It doesn't happen this way. They come in, they go, my God, how does this happen? So,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And this is the thing too, if any of the listeners are fighting with their ex-partner, just remember that when you whinge about your partner, you're telling your children that half of their DNA is no good. You're telling your kids they are no good. They may listen to it, but eventually, especially when they get old and they start reasoning it, you will lose their love and respect because they'll realize what you robbed them of in that period of time. And so any person who puts their ex down, you're going to lose your kids.
Ooh.
And if you do that, boys need their fathers. We know that of all the most horrific crimes against women that are committed by males, 80% of those came from families that didn't have a father. It's a lack of a rite of passage. It's a lack of having the guidance of a man to tell a boy, this is how you treat women the right way, and guiding them through that. As I say to women, they say, oh, my husband's gone, he's no longer around. I've got to have another partner. I go, no, you just got to find a man who's got interest in helping the kids and bring that person into your life. They don't have to go into your bed. The man you're with does not have to be a lover. There's plenty of men out there who love to mentor and help boys and do it the right way.
I want to say, Alan, I was just talking about this, saying that, women really need to start analyzing before they just jump into relationships. Read the person. And I want to ask you, what advice could you give to women that are, they want to mate, they want a partner, they want to be in a relationship, but they just keep picking the wrong person. They just keep repeating the same cycle. Their ex is the same as their new partner. They just keep meeting the same exact person with the same traits that they don't want. What encouraging advice could you give to them too?
Well, the starting point's really, really easy. It's like if I profile somebody, I need to know myself first of all, read them and know how to change the way I like to be spoken to match the way that they do. I need to know, I know where I am on the world scale on each of my traits. I need to know where they are. So I know how to change, in what direction and how much to change in the conversation to match the way they need to be spoken to. So we always start with me. So the same thing I would say to whether it's a man or a woman, know yourself first of all. Know what you bring to the table. Is this something that we've all got expectations of what we want from everybody else? But do we measure up to that same expectation? Quite often, it's not a matter of the woman needing to increase what she's expecting from the guy. It's a matter of reducing it, because quite often with the magazines and everything that's going on that's out there, women have got this ridiculous belief of what a man should be.
Mm-hmm.
The man, brings in the resources, it's a gentleman and all these other things. But what does a woman bring to that relationship as well? And then if they do that and they understand themselves, they will generally have a better understanding themselves. If they like, once I knew where my upside of my traits were, and especially the downside of my traits, I knew the upside where my strengths were and how I could make my life happier doing the things I love doing. But with knowing the downside, I knew what triggered me. So that when something was going on with somebody I was talking to, first thing is I'd ask myself, is this my trait raising its ugly head, getting in the way? Or is it something that I'm actually reading in the other person? So I always check me first. And as soon as I realize that if it's my trait, leave the other person alone and go and fix my problem. If it's them, then I can decide, is this something I can talk to them about, or is this somebody I just move away from altogether? Respect myself and make sure that I'm safe and all the rest of it. And that's what I put out to the women. Do just that. Know yourself, know what you bring to the table, then also know what you're looking for in a partner. Mm-hmm. Now, I had a coach that I trained, and after we finished doing the master course, she turned around to me and she said, oh, I've got a picture of a guy that I've just started dating. Is this someone I should date? And I went, well, first of all, I can't tell you the character from a photograph, but I can tell you their personality trait. But I said, first of all, he had a trait that showed that he has automatic give. He gives to everybody very quickly. That means that he'd give his money, his time, and all the rest of it. I said, so in a relationship, let's come back to you first of all. Do you need to know that the person loves you if they buy, or do you just want to get expensive gifts and things like that from them? Is it important that you know, or that they just do things for you? So I need them to know. Well, he had the trait that he naturally just give without thinking. I said, so when he gives to you, he may not have thought about it. So you don't know what he thinks. It's just the way he is. He just gives. If he's got the opposite trait where he stops and thinks before he gives, and he gives you an expensive present, then that person, really cares about you because they put a lot of thought into it. So I said, maybe not the actual automatic giving trait that you're looking for. You're looking for the other trait because this is what you need yourself to know, that they love you, they care for you. So it always comes back to us every time. Know ourselves first of all. Then we can look for the traits that we're looking for that will match that. And knowing that as well, we also then know the difference in the traits so that we know how to talk to the person so we don't trigger the downside of their traits, and we can really enjoy the upside of their traits.
That was all good, because that's what people really need to do. Stop. I say people want what they want so badly, even if it's desperation, they will take it just to say that they're not alone.
That's it.
Just to say that they're holding pieces together, they're keeping their family together. And they'll avoid all the signs that they've seen just to keep what they have, keep it in line. So I agree with you. And Alan, I want to know, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Well, the easiest way is through my website. And that's easy to find. It's just as my name is spelled, alanstevens.com, but .au for Australia. So alanstevens.com.au. And that'll take you straight to my website. They can find courses and things on there. If they go to the online courses section and they have a look, they'll find a free course on there as well, where they can learn a couple of traits and go and test them for themselves. And they can check it out from there. But there's also, I've got an intelligent bot on the bottom left-hand corner or right-hand corner of the screen, which when you ask it questions, it will go and search my knowledge base and answer the questions the way you've asked the questions. So you get the answers in the way that you need to hear them. And the more people who use that asking questions, the more it's getting educated and getting that even better again. But they can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Facebook as well.
And you have a book.
I had an ebook that I wrote quite some time ago, and that was about 10 years ago now, which looking at about a third of the traits from 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and then 5 to where you select your final courses before you pick your final subjects, I should say, for your career when you leave high school. And so it looked at a third of the traits in each of those categories. So instead of about 60-something traits that I work with, it was looking at about 20, 22 traits. And they're saying, okay, this is the traits. If you're this trait, and it showed you how to measure it and everything else, it would then go, rightio, these are the careers that would match that. Right at the moment, though, I'm redoing all of that and using AI to go and research all the different careers out there, finding the description of them, the aspects that those jobs need from the person who's fulfilling that role. And then I'm matching those up to all the traits that fit into those. So that then if I'm doing a profile around careers, for instance, I'll do a profile of somebody, I'll put the major traits I can see, whack it in the AI, it will come back as a short list of the particular careers that will match that person's personality.
And
So then we can guide them to go and do the right studies before they leave school or go to university, whatever, so they can find a career that they're going to be happy in.
And this book's available on Amazon or?
Well, the ebook that I put out before, it is available on Amazon. But right at the moment, I'm working on creating more manuals. I'm looking at bringing in some new traits, working with some other profilers, because there's not many of us around the world, and most of us do something slightly different. So I'm now doing joint ventures with a few of those to create courses that incorporate their material and my material. That will go into, because my master manual at the moment is about just short of 400 pages. And by the time I finish with that, it'll be much bigger again, because I'm putting more negotiation stuff in there, how to, for your sales, or even just negotiating in all areas of life. I'm looking at some extra traits, which will be really good for the women in particular when it's coming to analysing the partners that they're looking at dating as well. Because there'll be certain characteristics that will show somebody who, not that they're a bad person or a bad character, but they might be a bit shorter in what they'll put up with. Mm. And so those that may have more of a physical approach to life than the ability of being able to talk. And that's where a lot of violence comes from, where the people feel that they can't talk anymore and they're so frustrated. The only outlet they've got is either, they blow a fuse or they act violently in some way. They strike out.
Yeah.
So a lot of abusers aren't nasty people, but there are some that are. So you need to be able to pick those up front as well.
That would be a good thing for women to have today, especially with everything that's going on, right? Is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with? Anything you want to share about upcoming events or projects that we should look out for and that we can be a part of?
Well, the main thing is, I said, my focus now, because I'm in my 70s, not that I'm going to fall off the perch in a hurry, I want to make sure that other people are doing what I'm doing. So it's the clients I'm training with my master course now, I'm not looking for people who just want to learn it to get more sales and things like that. I'm looking for those people, yes, who want to do that, but they want to teach others. So I want to find people, anybody who wants to do my master course, they have to pass a interview. And the interview is very quickly working out, is this somebody who's focused on the money, or are they focused on the people they work with? If they focus on the people they work with, I'll take them through my master course. And then those that, when they finish that, who then want to create a course together with me that incorporates their specialties in their particular area, along with mine, so they can go out and train others in their field. And that's what I'm doing with the lecturer in Dublin, in Ireland, a HR professional in London, a hypnotherapist in America, a psychotherapist in Sydney, a number of dentists in different states in Australia who train other dentists in their practices, and working with all those different industries. So anybody who's interested in knowing more, who's interested in creating a career and teaching others, then we have a chat, and that's the next step.
Me. I'll reach out to you.
The interview is fairly easy, because while I'm talking to somebody, I can see their heart.
Yeah.
I get a measure of that really quickly. And so, it's like when people
profile my heart. Alan, I thank you for rebooking, because I could not miss out on you. This connection, it wasn't even an interview. It was a chat. This was a chat, and I hope that our listeners learned something from it and they draw it from you.
Phenomenous. Cold ink.